thing because I fade up from the intro, so I just talk a little bit while I say hi there, everybody. My name is Jack Packard.
I'm Darren Mooney.
I'm Stacy Grouden.
Yes, and Stacy, thank you so much for joining us this week on the Escapist Movie Podcast. Real quick, why don't you tell our listeners and or watchers a little about yourself?
Yeah, well, as I said, my name is Stacy Grouden, and I'm a freelance film critic and writer. And that's about it, I guess. Now I'm here.
That's perfect. I always feel the need to surround myself by people significantly more qualified than me, so I can just have them talk about all the things that I want to talk about. This week on the Escapist Movie Podcast, we will be talking about November movies, specifically something I think is a perfect November movie, the Addams Family movie. Then we will move on to Sean Already we need an edit point because of Cookie. Hi. Do you need to leave?
Be a rough cut there.
So this week on the Escapist Movie Podcast, first we're going to talk about November movies transitioning from Halloween to Christmas and what I think is a wonderful November movie, The Addams Family. Then we will move on to the late Sean Connery, Sir Sean Connery, and just talk about some movie memories we have with him. And finally, we will discuss Songbird, aka that movie that seems to be made last weekend about the current global pandemic. That is a very, very bad idea. How exciting! Hello and welcome to the Escapist Movie Podcast. Those are my transition noises onto the podcast. First up, I'm a big fan of Halloween. I love horror movies and scary movies. I love the Halloween season for myself and my children. We spend a lot of October and September making costumes, decorating the house, getting ready. And then there's November, and there's no like Thanksgiving-y movies, or, you know, not until you get to later Thanksgiving. So the transition from horror movies into more family-friendly movies has always been tricky, but there's the Addams Family movie, which is a fantastic film, and I feel fills that niche of transitioning.
It does indeed. The Addams Family is kind of a fascinating movie. I went back and watched it at your suggestion, and I also ended up watching the sequel as well, The Addams Family Values.
Yes.
And, you know, I mean, I suspect that it probably won't be a hot take. I would argue that The Addams Family Values is probably a significantly better movie than the original Addams Family. Really?
No, I would agree.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll discuss this more.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I feel like you should go first, since you're arguing in favor of the Addams Family. What is it about the Addams Family that makes it that perfect movie for that sweet spot for you?
Well, one, you know, it opens by the Addams Family literally like dumping on Christmas. That to me is like, because when November hits, I'm not ready for Christmas yet. So the movie starting by like boiling carolers alive gets you right in the mood. I feel like it has the right horror aesthetic, like the sequence in which the children are doing their Shakespeare play and the entire stage is filled with fountains of gushing blood. That's so perfect. And Addams Family Values the kids go to summer camp. It's not even a holiday movie.
Okay, well, hold on. Well, we'll come back to Addams Family Values then in a moment. But yeah. I think you are onto something with that kind of transition between Halloween and Christmas, particularly because, and it's probably something that's aged remarkably well, in that I don't remember this being a thing when I was younger, but it is definitely a thing now, where it's Halloween is a gigantic holiday, and then as soon as Halloween's over, it's quite literally, well, Christmas is here. And there's no gap between the two. And again, I don't know how it is in the States where you guys have Thanksgiving. And in terms of Thanksgiving, the only real Thanksgiving movie I can think of is probably like Knives Out, because that's really a movie about bringing the family together for a holiday. That's not really a holiday anyway. And then sort of having a bit of fun around that while you're all trapped in the house together. But yeah, the Addams Family, I think, kind of scratches that sweet spot. And I think it's more conceptual than you're kind of making it with the dumping on the Christmas carols. In that, what I really think of when I think about the 90s Addams Family movies in particular is this idea that they are at once a horror genre, like right down to those wonderful early shots of kind of, is it cousin the Thing running down the street, running down the thing as a detached hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I love, by the way, that the CGI is done so you can see that he's completely hollow inside as well. It's not like he's kind of cut off and has a bit of like meat or a bone on him. He's just like literally a glove that wanders around with human skin on it. But like it is very much like, it's very much framed in the context of a horror movie. You have things like Cousin It, who's this giant hairball. Fester, who's this gigantic kind of like morbid kind of like white baggy eyes, like a body that's been left out far too long. Morticia, who's basically Elvira. Gomez, who is just, pretty creepy in his own right. But no, I was going to say, yeah, so Gomez is a little creepy with the mustache and the big bug eyes and stuff. Like, I love Gomez to death. He's fantastic. But he is very much part of... And Lurch, who's obviously just like Frankenstein's monster. But that's all your Halloween stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And your Christmas stuff is they're a family. Like, I think there's a very convincing argument to be made that the Addams Family is perhaps the quintessential, like, American ideal family unit, in that it is a family of very distinct, very rugged individualists who come together, forge a distinct group identity. And, like, even in the Addams Family, in the 1991 movie, Morticia does this a lot. Morticia talks at great length about how they are a family, how they are bonded together, how no matter what happens, they can get kicked out of the house, they can get burnt alive by peasants, but no matter what, they will stay together as a family. And I think there's a solid argument to be made that, like, Gomez and Morticia are perhaps the healthiest family, or healthiest married couple in pop culture. I absolutely love, there was a note going around on the internet a little while ago from the original script for the movie that wanted to clarify that, yes, we are aware that this is a children's movie and the primary audience for this is family, but we want you to know from literally the first scene that Gomez and Morticia share together that every single moment they are not on camera, they are probably in bed together doing unmentionable things to one another. But like, there's so much passion, love there. And like, this is the thing that I think, and the movie is very keenly aware of this, and we'll probably pivot to talk about Addams Family Values and why I think Addams Family Values is maybe a little bit better in a moment. But it ties back to this, which is, these were released, in the early 90s. These are around the time that you had this idea of kind of, you had the Republican moral majority coming in. You had this idea of a very conservative idea of kind of looking at history of the Clinton impeachment over an affair, for example. You had Forrest Gump, which was like, well, the 60s were just a big mistake unless you did absolutely everything the establishment told you to do. But then you have, in the midst of that, you have this kind of like push and pull happening with the idea of the nuclear family and the idea of what the American family can be. And in particular, it's notable that the Addams Family movie has a sequence where Morticia's walking through the school before that wonderful play with all the blood spurting. And they take her to a board and they say, here's a list of people that we admire. And on that board, there's a picture of George H.W. Bush, who a year after the movie was made would say America needs to be more like the Waltons than the Simpsons, which became its own separate kind of comedy goldmine. But the movie, the sequel, The Addams Family Values, takes its name from a Dan Quayle quote, which became part of George H.W. Bush's re-election campaign platform, which was the idea that we need strong American family values. And what I think I genuinely... No, like, honestly, what I genuinely love about The Addams Family is that it is the... conceptually, perhaps, the purest American ideal of the family, in that it's these people who are very odd, very distinct, very individual, who do not blend in any way, shape, or form, but who are still a family, even though they don't conform to what we would expect a family to be. And throughout, even in the original Addams Family, you have the idea of Fester, who is posing as, who's been woken up with amnesia and thinks he's somebody else's son, but who gets kind of like adopted into the Addams Family. Like he's kind of re-acclimatized in. He's initially like, what the hell are these weirdos up to? And he's like, no, wait, these weirdos are actually really great fun, which is very much like, if you wanted to pick an example of kind of like the kind of movie this is, but for children, it's very much along the lines of something like Philadelphia or something like Flawless, where it's like, you have this kind of group that you've been told by society are not normal, are not healthy, are disturbing, they're bringing down property values, they're unsettling, and they're kind of creepy. But actually, no, when you spend time with them, they are amazing and wonderful and just as loving as everybody else. So that is why I think the Addams Family movies kind of stand astride that gap between Halloween and Christmas. They're as horrific as Halloween needs to be, and as family-centric, idealistic, and romantic as a Christmas movie needs to be. That's my take on the point.
Well said. Stacy, any thoughts on Addams Family?
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that as well. And this is where also my argument that Family Values is better than Addams Family would come in, that the ending that the ending really illustrates a lot of what Darren has said about the Addams Family being kind of ideal in terms of how they relate to each other and how they express their emotions and how they come together as a family. Which is to say, at the end of the movie, they are celebrating Halloween. And they are celebrating it the way you would expect a normal family to mark Christmas. You see them, getting excited over the kids' costumes. There's a very funny line where Wednesday says she's a homicidal maniac. She's just wearing her normal clothes, and she reveals that she's a homicidal maniac because they look like everybody else. Which I think tells us something very funny about Wednesday's view of the world too, and how the rest of the world is deviant, and not the Addams Family. But yeah, just the way that they are celebrating Halloween as if you would normally see Christmas celebrated on screen in the way that Halloween is marked in this movie. They're putting up decorations, they're wearing costumes, they have their family over. Fester has come back into the fold, and it's at that point where Cousin Nick comes over and is asking, like, what is the deal with Fester? Wasn't he an imposter? And then Gomez says, oh, no, actually, he's not. The doctor really did find him in the Bermuda Triangle. And he really did lose his memory. Yeah. Everything we set up that was set up as false actually is the case. And Fester is our real brother. And I always took issue with how quickly and unambiguously that was resolved in a 15-second conversation at the end of the film.
To me, like, both movies...
That's a little bit of the gap, I would argue, between, like, Addams Family and Addams Family Values, in that, like, Addams Family Values doesn't resolve its central plot in 15 seconds of exposition, at the...
No, like, speaking to Darren's point here, the Addams Family is an incredibly accepting and generous family. The way that they were willing to re-accept Fester in the first movie is very similar to the scene when Debbie is like regaling them in Addams Family Values about all the people she killed, and they were agreeing with her that she was right to kill. Like, you go, girl. I know you've strapped us to electric chairs, but we are with you. We support you. Like, that just speaks to what a fantastic family unit they are. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like, don't trust a book by its cover just because it's covered in fake blood, or asking if your cookies are made from real Girl Scouts. Doesn't mean there isn't someone with a very clear and accepting and tolerant worldview behind it.
Absolutely. And so, like, what I will say is part of the thing that upsets me about Addams Family Values is the Gomezification of it. We get the new, I love Raul Julia. I love his take as Gomez. He is a fantastic actor, rest in peace. And he gave an incredible life to Gomez. But then we get the baby. I'm trying to remember the baby's name now.
Pubert.
Pubert, yeah.
Thank you.
We want a name that, child can really grow up with, and we don't want him to feel unusual or outcast.
Pubert. Who just has Gomez's hair and mustache. And then, of course, Wednesday's new boyfriend from summer camp who shows up with Gomez's hair and mustache. And to me, that was just like... that just sucked all of the personality out of the weirdness of the baby and the new boyfriend, where they're like, just make him look like the other character.
What I will say, what I absolutely love about Pubert is, like, in the Addams Family Values, what I think makes the Addams Family Values arguably a better movie is that it's more thematically consistent. So you have this recurring theme throughout that the family in the original Addams Family movie is under siege, but it's under siege from one direction. That one direction is the arrival of Fester to come and steal the fortune from the vault underneath. In Addams Family, and I would argue that, like, I like the Addams Family movie a lot. I really, really do, before I frame this criticism very carefully. But, like, the problem with it being just about one thing and having one core narrative thread is that it becomes very episodic and disconnected, and you end up with things like, well, we're jumping from one series of jokes to another series of jokes, and we got to tie them back somehow, and it's like, oh, we got to the end, but we didn't really resolve it, so here's 15 seconds of exposition explaining that Fester was really Fester after all of that.
Right.
with Addams Family Values, what they do, and I think it's very clever in terms of structure, but I also think it's very clever in terms of theme, is the Addams Family comes under attack from literally every possible direction in terms of like making them more conventional and more conformist. So obviously you have Debbie show up and she takes Fester away and she literally remakes him in an image that she finds like appealing. She puts like a blonde wig on him and puts him in a Don Johnson Miami suit so that he might look like, not that he'll actually look convincing, but he might look more like somebody trying to conform in the way that other people do. And by the way, I love that the Addams Family Values just goes whole hog in this. Everybody conforming is Aryan, just in case you don't get the subtext here. Everybody conforming is blonde-haired and blue-eyed, just in case you don't get what the movie's getting at. And then you have what's happening inside the family with baby Pubert. And baby Pubert all of a sudden wakes up, and he's a normal baby. And by the way, blonde curly hair. That's how you know he's a normal baby. But what I love about the Pubert plotline is that even though that happens, the family still accept him. Like the family still, like Morticia, like one of the most hilarious sequences in the movie is Morticia with the light across her eyes, sitting there trying to read The Cat in the Hat, like a normal parent to a normal child.
Yes.
Which is like, it's like the worst thing in the world, kind of discovering that your child is normal. And it's like, how do you do that? Well, you deal with it as an understanding parent. You say, this is still somebody I love. I'm going to take care of them, even though they're not the person that I would have expected them to be, in case you don't get the subtext of what's going on here.
So tolerant.
Then you have what's happening at the camp, and I adore the sequence at the camp so much. But like quite literally, I go to this camp, which is this reenactment of like a very particular version of American history, a very particular, very appropriated version of American history. And they have this kind of like this idea of like kids are supposed to be happy, they're supposed to be outdoors, they're supposed to be singing, they're supposed to be watching like Disney movies. They do The Great Escape, but instead of going in the box, you go in the box and you watch Little Mermaid, and it's brilliant. And like, no, it's literally shot like a Prison Break movie, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But what I absolutely love is like it becomes very, very clear what's actually going on at the moment when they're casting the play, the Thanksgiving play, where it's like, okay, and all our pilgrims are going to be played by these kids over here, all blonde-haired, all blue-eyed, all very conventionally like looking like the kids that you will see on the front of brochures for 90s summer camps. And it's like, oh, and our Native Americans, they're going to be played by, and it's like, okay, Wednesday and Pugsley, obviously. But then it's like, okay, the chubby kid, it's the Jewish kid played by David Krumholtz.
The Jewish kid, the disabled kids, the immigrant kids. Oh, no, the subtlety goes right out the window there. Absolutely.
But I absolutely love that, like, in spite of this, and this is where it gets kind of bigger and broader, is that, like, the David Krumholtz kid ends up being accepted into the Addams family, even though he is, like, nominally normal in that he's just Jewish. That's his thing. It's like, he's like, that's, like, the only thing that distinguishes him from other people in this situation. It's like, but he's embraced with kind of a warm hand and a warm heart. And, like, arguably, you had that implicitly in Addams Family, where it's very clear that Gomez cares for Dan Hedea's lawyer, who's helping him exploit tax loopholes, which I kind of love as a small little detail. They're so American, they're exploiting tax details. But like I think that when you get to Addams Family Values, I think that's what makes it a better movie. Is that it's stronger and more cohesively tied to that idea that the Addams family they're unusual, but they are as much a family as anybody else and as deserving of family as anybody else. And that maybe if you don't see them as such, that's your problem rather than theirs. And I think that Values just commits to that in a way that rewatching it as an adult is astounding. Like there's a moment where Pugsley shoots a bald eagle out of the sky, and Wednesday says, is that an American eagle? I thought they were extinct. And Wednesday's response is, it is now.
Yes.
Yeah, no, so that would be my argument for Values, perhaps.
That's all. I mean, I think they're both fantastic movies.
Yeah.
And like I just feel like the focus of the first movie is more on that family dynamic, whereas the focus of Values is a little more sporadic. They leaned a little too hard into the aren't we weird jokes in that, the Cousin It skateboarding because that was a cool thing that you did in the 90s.
You say that, Jack, as if the original Addams Family didn't have an MC Hammer soundtrack. Do you not remember like the sequence where they're selling the lemonade made with real lemons, but like where Lurch is carrying a boombox playing MC Hammer music? Like, to be fair,
MC Hammer's fantastic. So.
That is a fair point. That is also a fair point.
Well, and the other thing that I'm just realizing right now, because I am the only American here and therefore incredibly egotistical, when I pitched this as an idea, it didn't even occur to me that neither of you celebrate Thanksgiving. So I'm talking about Thanksgiving movies. Like that never crossed my mind, and I do apologize.
Yeah, I was just saying it's interesting that Thanksgiving is not... I mean, there is the play commemorating it in Addams Family Values, which is skewering the holiday of Thanksgiving. So I don't know if it counts as an anti-Thanksgiving film in that regard. Like, does that maybe make it more appropriate? That's like, here's our modern day understanding of kind of what happened.
Yeah. And I think it also makes it a better like Halloween Christmas bridge movie, because it very much says Thanksgiving doesn't count. Like, it's very much like, these are the two holidays. Thanksgiving's way out. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, and again, for me, like the fact that they are doing a Thanksgiving play at the end of their summer camp.
The maths on these movies don't really add up, Jack. I mean, to be honest, the first movie opens with them dumping on Christmas carolers, and then 7 months later it's Halloween. I mean, the timeline doesn't really make sense, to be fair.
Fine. Well, what other things? I know we had talked a little bit about things like A Nightmare Before Christmas. These other kind of gateway movies that we can watch during November. Any thoughts? Any ideas?
What I would say is, in terms of kind of like movies that I like in terms of that window, I was the one who suggested Nightmare Before Christmas, because Nightmare Before Christmas is the perfect holiday movie, because you can watch it anytime in those 2 months. And it fits perfectly. It's either a very late Halloween movie or a very early Christmas movie, and it works perfectly in that sense. In terms of what you specifically mentioned with Addams Family and Addams Family Values, I'm gonna throw a controversial new choice into the mix, which is Adam Wingard's The Guest, which I think is a Halloween Christmas movie. In that it is a movie that takes place at Halloween. It stars Dan Stevens. He's a character who shows up at the family of this house, this serviceman who possibly died overseas or kind of died in an institution, and he claims to be an old friend of their son. And he's like, I would like to move in with you and be with your family at this time, which is also Halloween. And the movie goes full-scale Halloween. There's a Halloween school dance. There's lots of shots of pumpkins. There's lots of kind of slasher movie references and jokes. But at the same time, it takes that framework of kind of like a John Carpenter slasher horror movie and applies it to like the thematic beats of a Hallmark family Christmas movie. In that, as this Dan Stevens character moves into this household, all of a sudden, he finds himself immediately connecting with this family. And he starts imparting life lessons to them. Like the dad, who's having difficulty getting a promotion at his job, who's feeling shut out, who feels like he might not have a career as a breadwinner in his household. All of a sudden, with a little assistance from our new guest, he finds that people who have gotten promotions ahead of him are mysteriously disappearing, and he's bumping right up the corporate ladder. He's living the American dream. And throughout, you have this kind of like discussion with the kids where, he'll teach the kids how to use knives and things like that. All these important values. So like, I would argue that The Guest kind of falls perfectly in that gap, in that it takes the aesthetics, themes, and like general structure of a Christmas movie and applies the language of like a conventional slasher or horror movie. So if you're looking for a movie that kind of fills that really, really weird and specific itch, I think that's the one to go with. That would be my hottest take.
I think that's a beautiful suggestion. Unfortunately, I've never seen The Guest. Anyone who knows me on the internet knows that I have hung out with and spent time with the writer Simon Barrett. And it's embarrassing that I haven't seen his movie.
It's almost a point of principle at this point. It would almost be disappointing if you did see it. I finally got around to seeing it, 6 years later. How was it? It was grand.
It was fine. Hey, Simon, you did all right there. No, I think that's a great recommendation, though, and I like it. Stacy, do you have any thoughts on a good November movie that mixes these kind of like horror and family elements?
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to think about this in terms of, yeah, those ideas of family, of coming together, and of celebrating kind of a holiday as well and having it marked in some way. I don't have anything nearly as inspired as Darren's suggestion of The Guest. Certainly, I know we were talking about The Nightmare Before Christmas, which of course has all of the Halloween imagery, the aesthetics, the kind of creepy Henry Selick, Danny Elfman combo. But I would say that is more of a Christmas movie, just if we're coming back to this.
Ooh.
My thoughts on The Nightmare Before Christmas is that it is very firmly a Christmas movie, in that it's about someone who wants to celebrate Christmas, very excited about it, wants to share it with people. Something goes wrong in the planning stages of that. Many things in the case of The Nightmare Before Christmas. But ultimately, you're able to bring out enough of the magic of the holiday to get it to work with a little help from your friends. I think that is kind of beat by beat what you would expect from a kind of Christmas story.
And I will agree with you that even though we do watch that around Halloween time, I do consider it a Christmas movie. I think the thing that really tips the scale is that it literally has Christmas in the title. It's not The Nightmare After Halloween. It is The Nightmare Before Christmas. It is a movie about someone discovering the true meaning of Christmas. It is a Christmas movie.
Yes.
They also live in Halloween Town. The opening musical number is This Is Halloween. I mean, I feel like there's an argument, perhaps.
There's an argument, but they're wrong because it's very much a Christmas movie. And you know what?
It's a reverse Addams Family.
It's
Yeah, Addams Family begins at Christmas and ends at Halloween. Nightmare Before Christmas starts at Halloween and ends at Christmas.
Oh, you're
so you really need two.
That's
You really need 2 movies in your rotation. Yeah, you need 2 movies in your rotation year round.
Well, and I think like this is a conversation that we will be having as we get into December, as we get closer to Christmas time, as what the official definition of a Christmas movie is. But for me, a blanket is discovering like the true meaning of friendship or Christmas or that kind of BS. And that's what Jack Skellington does.
Yes.
And so it's a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
And I'm going to leave it there because I edit this so I can end on my point. So
Perfect.
All right, let's come back here to Sir Sean Connery. Unfortunately, recently passed away at a very ripe old age. He was in his 90s, I believe.
90 years old exactly, I believe, yeah.
Oh, 90 years old. And so, you know, at that point, you know, you did it. You beat the odds. You lived a heck of a life. 50 plus years of acting credits under his name. I know, like, for most people, they will look at Sean Connery and immediately think of James Bond. But for me, who is not necessarily a big fan of James Bond in general, I think of him, like, when I first think of Sean Connery, it's The Rock. Like, I think of The Rock, wonderful. I think of Dragonheart, I think of Highlander. I think of him more as the "You're the man now, dog" meme than anything. Sean Connery, the first meme.
The first meme.
That website's still up, actually.
Huh? Is it?
Is it still up? That's the question now.
Hold on.
We're going to the fact machine to
we
check,
have
apparently.
to find out.
Yeah.
You're the man now, dog, which is ytmnd.com.
Listeners can play at home on their phones or audio devices.
It is. You're the man now, dog.com is still up there. Oh, it's beautiful.
Good.
Top ranked memes.
Yeah. So just one little feather in Sir Sean's bow, as it were. Although apparently he did not like to be called Sir Sean. According to the stories that went round, apparently when he was meeting writers, he'd say it's Sean Connery or just Sean. If you stick a Sir in front of it, I'll walk out the door. All right. So we believe.
Then I will respect that, absolutely, Sean.
It's funny.
Oh, go ahead, Stacey.
No, sorry, I was just going to say, even, you know, he hadn't been in a film for probably nearly 20 years, at least 15, and he still has such, he's still at the forefront of internet culture in You're the Man Now, Dog. You know, he's still
Yeah.
looms so large over popular culture. I mean, just in general, but that there is this sort of very funny link to meme culture through You're the Man Now, Dog.
Well, he was
Decades
part
after
of,
he finished acting.
he was
It's
part of
very
that
funny to me.
generation of actors who, where it's like he was the old style of movie star where we don't necessarily have that anymore. Obviously a very distinctive voice, very easy for late night comedians to do impressions of, which probably helped his career. But no, his last live action film, the unfortunate League of Extraordinary Gentlemen in 2003. Although I see a 2012 credit here for Sir
Billy. Yes,
which is
the
some
animated
sort of
Scottish
animated.
film. It was an
feature.
animated Scottish film. Sean Connery was very much, as you might be aware, involved in Scottish causes. He famously donated his $1 million upfront fee for Diamonds Are Forever to the Scottish Education Fund. Very much a kind of a Scottish patriot. So apparently the story behind that is that he was able to record that remotely. It is, what I've seen of it, not a good film. But it's kind of nice that he was like, I will come out of retirement just a little bit to do my bit for Scottish filmmaking, even if it may not have been, the greatest bit.
Absolutely. And I know the rumor is, as far as the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is concerned, is that Sean Connery passed on Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings because he didn't necessarily understand the CG element of it. And after they were such big successes, decided to do his own CG film, which was The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which is certainly a thing.
Like,
It's a film.
I love Sean Connery's. Sean Connery's bad movie choices are almost as much fun as his good movie choices, and we'll talk about his good movie choice in a moment. But my favorite, Sean Connery bad movie choice story is The Avengers from 1998. Where the director went to visit him with the script, and he sat down, and Sean Connery read the script, and Sean was like, well, it's very, very good. Yeah, very good, apparently. But I'm a little bit interested, talk to my agent, have your people talk to my people. And it was very much like the director knew that this was pitter-patter nonsense. This was just a way of getting around the house. So as he was leaving, he said, by the way, I'm visiting Michael Caine tomorrow, and he's not going to say no to this. Apparently that was how you convinced Sir Sean Connery to appear in the 1998 version of The Avengers. You say that if he doesn't accept the role right now, you'll offer it to Michael Caine, and Michael Caine will do it for nothing.
Boom.
Apparently the deal was made then and there.
Right? It's hard to even know where to start. Highlander. I feel like Highlander is a very important film/television series for me, as was most of my weekends watching the television series and discovering the movies as a child. He made unusual film choices throughout his career.
I think he's an interesting precedent for maybe someone like Robert Pattinson. I'm sure there are people between Sean Connery and Robert Pattinson that I could mention, but someone who has a big franchise, who becomes the biggest movie star in the world, finishes up work on that series, and then goes, you know what? I'm going to put on a mankini and some thigh-high boots and make Zardoz. They just fully going off the rails and doing some weird sci-fi stuff in the 70s and 80s to kind of shake the Bond off himself,
Well, I mean, that's
shake and not stir it. Shake it and not stir it off.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting because it reminds me, this is something Jack mentioned. You're not a huge fan of Bond, and so you don't necessarily see Sean Connery's Bond. Not to make inferences about Jack's age and Stacy's age, but for myself and my age, I remember coming of age with what we might call late Sean Connery. I was born the year that he won the Oscar for, The Untouchables? And 2 years after that, he was Indiana Jones's dad, despite being only, 11 years older than Harrison Ford? But, that was how I grew up with Sean Connery. And then he was in The Rock in the mid-90s when I hit my teens. And it was this is, Sean Connery's an old action star. And then I remember being about 10 years old and, being wrong about movies, not for the first time and not for the last time. My dad saying, yeah, Sean Connery, he was my favorite Bond. And I was like, there's no way that man who looks a little bit, like kind of like Gandalf the Grey was ever like James Bond. And like going back and kind of discovering that, yes, actually, it turns out that the very bearded, kind of white-haired, avuncular figure was actually, yes, he was the kind of original sex symbol. And I think that, what's interesting is that you have basically 3 phases, I would argue, of Connery's career, which the first one is the bit where he breaks out and he is Bond. And the bit where even while he's Bond, he's very unhappy being Bond, and he's pushing a little bit against being Bond. I think when he did Marnie, he insisted that Hitchcock send him the script before he signed on, even though like most actors would give various parts of their anatomy to work with Hitchcock, because he didn't want to be cast in something like North by Northwest as another secret agent or spy. It was like, I want to know the role is different enough from Bond that when I'm playing it, I'm not going to invite comparisons. And then there's the later stage, which is the one that I kind of like happened in real time for Darren, which is like The Rock, Dragonheart, even go back to Just Cause, or, like The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Avengers, Remember Entrapment? Yeah, I remember
Zeta Jones, of course.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's probably some interesting stuff there that we don't need to go into. But the bit I find most interesting is exactly what Stacey mentioned there, the shake the Bond off phase, where Connery, like, actually genuinely and repeatedly pushed himself as a performer. Because I think that when you look at Bond and when you look at his later career, that's very much archetypal Sean Connery, and he's very, very good at it. Like The Rock, I would argue, is one of the great action movie performances, where, where he absolutely, like, it's just screen presence. It's pure, distilled, old-fashioned movie-making screen presence. And again, the fact that, like, in Sean Connery's later career, so much of the movie hinged on the fact that either like his accent wasn't an issue, so he was doing stuff like playing the Latvian submarine commander in like was it The Hunt for Red October, which is, and by the way, if you want to feel sorry for anybody, feel sorry for Sam Neill, who like worked really hard on his Latvian accent, and then Sean Connery just shows up as like, this is what we're doing. Even things like when he plays like the Spaniard / Egyptian in Highlander and still sounds like Sean Connery. The fact that he plays the voice of the dragon in Dragonheart and still sounds like Sean Connery. The fact that so many of his later roles tended to be mythic in nature, so like playing, for example, King Arthur in First Knight, but appearing at the end of The Prince of Thieves in the cameo as Richard the Lionheart, which is very much like, we have a screen legend playing an actual legend, like having that kind of mythic weight behind him. And what I find, like, and all that stuff is really, really great, and I think that's an amazing part of what he does, but it does overshadow the bit that Stacey mentioned, which was the bit where he actually pushed himself really, really hard as an actor. Like, very famously, when he did Diamonds Are Forever, he said, I will do Diamonds Are Forever and I will give my fee to charity, but in return, Universal's going to greenlight 2 movies of my choosing, and they're going to be gritty character studies, like The Offense, which, if you have seen it, The Offense is basically like Doubt, but Sean Connery's an angry Scottish policeman in it. That's and it's very, very, very good and worth seeking out. But doing stuff like Zardoz, which Stacey mentioned, for example, doing stuff like Outlander, which is like a British shot western set on the moon of Jupiter, where he plays like a cowboy sheriff. Again, like doing these things and playing like in the Name of the Rose with Christian Slater, where he plays like a sexy monk detective. Which is, again,
sounds like exactly something I want to watch.
Yeah, starring Sean Connery. Tell me, like, you want to watch a sexy monk detective played by Sir Sean Connery. But yeah,
sure.
That phase where it was, like, a real sense of, I have no idea what I am now that I'm not Bond, but I can be anything I want. I think his favorite film is... The favorite film of his career is The Man Who Would Be King, which was directed by John Huston and starring Michael Caine as well. And that is also, like, if listeners or watchers are looking for something Sean Connery-esque, but maybe not as seen or as monolithic or as iconic as his core work, but very worth seeking out, I'd recommend those movies as well. Also, I think he did a lot of ensemble work. So after he left Bond, he very much kind of, like, tried to shed not only the persona of Bond, obviously by growing the beard, quite literally growing the beard so you couldn't recognize the face, but very much taking roles which, again, you played a spy in one of the most successful franchises in the world. You are arguably right now the most bankable star in the world, and Sean Connery's like, I don't want to be a movie star. I want to be like a suspect in Murder on the Orient Express.
Yeah.
Or, no, I don't want to be that. I want to be like a sidekick character that nobody even remembers is in the movie when they talk about Bridge on the River Kwai. It's like, yeah, that's like, that's kind of like that aspect of kind of things,
Hey there, everyone. This is Jack editing the episode. Darren wanted me to correct something he just said. Sean Connery never appeared in Bridge on the River Kwai. It was the 1977 A Bridge Too Far that Connery appeared in. Clearly, Darren is a big dummy. Now back to the show. No, and Stacy, I think that's incredibly insightful to look at someone like Robert Pattinson or even, I'm going to forget Harry Potter's real name, Daniel Radcliffe.
Sure, yeah.
Is these actors who were known for mega franchise movies, young actors who then decide, to make The Lighthouse or to make Guns Akimbo or to play a farting corpse because they have the ability to do whatever they want now. And so like thinking of Sean Connery as just like that actor who was like, guess what? I get to be Zardoz now. I'm wearing a red thong and saying these lines, which I don't know if I have the constitution to repeat. I think
there's a lot of Connery lines like that, aren't there?
Well, it definitely gives you a little more respect for the man and also like a little insight into maybe an older way of Hollywood. The whole like one for me, one for them aspect of it, which we don't see a lot anymore.
Because it's all for them.
Because it's all for them now, exactly. And of course, he had a lot for them up front and then cashed in all his chips and did whatever he wanted after that. But yeah, I know Darren and I have talked about this before, kind of like your Marvel movie machine, and the only one who's actually cashed in on the one for them, one for me is Taika Waititi, who went from Thor Ragnarok to Jojo Rabbit just to shake things up a little bit. And so, yeah, maybe we can all learn a little lesson from Sean Connery.
Yeah. Although it is hard to think of anybody, like I know I have directly compared him to Robert Pattinson, but anybody who maybe has the same kind of trajectory as Sean Connery. And that probably is a lot to do with him originating Bond on screen. Like if you ask anyone in the street to do a James Bond impression, they're going to do a Sean Connery impression.
Of course.
I know, as we've mentioned the Marvel Machine, we've mentioned Robert Pattinson. I don't know if there is anybody who occupies that same level of stardom or instant recognition. And there's probably a lot of reasons for that, but I wonder if you guys have any thoughts. Do we have a successor to Sean Connery?
I think it's interesting that you see Daniel Craig trying to do what Connery did, where Daniel Craig has basically gone, okay, ironically, despite only making 5 Bond films, I will be the longest serving Bond actor ever, because of like this unique situation we find ourselves in. But Craig has always been like, okay, I'm going to take roles that are odd or are unique or are small. So like, for example, I'll play the character in Knives Out, or I will play the character in Logan Lucky, which are designed to push as far as possible from your conception of who James Bond is or who the actor who plays James Bond is. But yeah, no sense of being able to get off the ground in the same way Connery did. In large part, I think because we don't make like movie stars like that anymore. We tend to associate more with characters. I mean, like, it's notable that like when you talk about the Marvel Machine, all of those actors, generally speaking, have tried to do stuff outside that to branch out. And I think, like, to be fair, a lot of them really have succeeded in that sense. I think Chris Evans, for example, has done a lot of really great work. Chris Hemsworth has tried to do really great work. Like, he did, obviously, Black Hat with Michael Mann, for example. He did Extraction on Netflix, for example. But he did Ghostbusters. Like, that role in Ghostbusters for Chris Hemsworth is just a joy. Right. And he's very much like, that sort of stuff is kind of what I would imagine being a modern Sean Connery. But because there's no... The movie stars don't mean as much as they used to.
I wonder, though, if we could look inside the Marvel Machine with someone like Chris Hemsworth, who was kind of done with Thor after A Dark World / Age of Ultron, and said, hey, if we're making another Thor movie, I want to branch out. I want to be more of a comedic presence, as that's something I enjoy. I want to grow my character, and they let him do that within Ragnarok. And obviously, like, still within the machine, but he is able to grow as an actor within the machine and try new things. Does that count?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. It's just, will it transfer now to a post-Thor career? Or, I mean, he is continuing as Thor, as far as we know.
Right.
But it is interesting that he has this kind of character development in a way that I don't know that James Bond in the Sean Connery iteration can be said to have in any shape or form.
That's very true.
I would argue
he's
that,
a real Bildungsroman kind of hero where he's just kind of having episodic little adventures. There's no real characterization there.
There's no characterization whatsoever. But I would argue that, like, by the time you reach, and again, I don't think this was intentional on Connery's part. I don't think this was part of like the Connery master plan or something like that. But I think that by the time you reach like You Only Live Twice, or particularly when he comes back for Diamonds Are Forever, there's a real sense of like, well, I am taking this significantly less seriously than I did back when we did Dr. No, and like From Russia with Love. But yeah, it's not. I don't think that was an intentional sort of like, well, watch me redefine the character of Bond for future generations.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. Well, and for it's Sean Connery is also an actor who means different things to different generations, and I think I'm the oldest one here, as I'm the closest to 40, and so like for me, like I fall in between the middle, like my dad and Sean Connery is James Bond. That's fine. My younger brother and Sean Connery is The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. For me, it's all The Rock, and Dragonheart and The Rock. The Rock is the greatest movie ever made. Hands down, bar none, and of course, like The Untouchables too. I suppose that's a little in there.
Like that.
too,
Let's just throw in the one he won the Oscar for. Let's just if you have to.
How about that?
Yeah.
And so like this is also, he's also one of those actors who is now gone that has spanned generations and means drastically different things to different generations. Most people probably know him as the voice, as like the character from SNL's Celebrity Jeopardy. Then they know him from his movies now. Most people know him from his gifs. You're the man now, dog.
Well, I mean, or just like a cultural osmosis as Bond. I think the fact that Bond has been around so long means, and the fact that Connery hasn't been making movies. Again, this is one of the weird things about living in a franchise-dominated world. Connery hasn't been making movies in like 20 years. So like the way in which people younger than us possibly are going to encounter him is in, well, let's do a franchise run on Bond, or let's do a deep dive on Bond, or let's talk, because those are the movies that are still being made of the set that he did. So I suspect that, like, I think it's kind of interesting that, like, you and I and Stacy may know Connery in real time as the guy from The Rock, or the guy from Entrapment, or the guy from, like, Dragonheart. But it's kind of odd that, like, my younger sister will probably ironically know him better for the role he played, 40 years earlier in in like Dr. No and From Russia with Love. I think it's kind of interesting how that works.
Time is a flat circle.
Now it is, yeah.
I feel like I would be remiss to mention, not to mention, that as an Irish person, I also would think of Darby O'Gill and The Little People, the Disney movie, when I think of Sean Connery. Are you aware of this movie, Darby O'Gill and the Little People, Jack?
I am not.
Darren, you know this movie, right?
Yes, we watched it in school, appropriately enough, like as part of like our Irish kind of history lesson kind of sort of sensibility.
Yeah,
I think we did actually watch it at school.
What did you learn from it? What are you supposed to learn from Darby O'Gill and the Little People?
I think it's very much like, I think the context in which we like watched it was, this is how Americans see us. So you need to be prepared for that. Like going out there into the world as an Irish person, you need to be aware that when people hear that you're Irish, this is what's going to be running through their head. So Jack, Darby O'Gill and the Little People is on Disney Plus right now. It does, I believe, come with a warning about cultural appropriation, but don't worry about that. Okay. It is fascinating. It is the story of a battle of wits between a wily Irish gentleman and a bunch of wily leprechauns, and shenanigans ensue. But Sir Sean Connery stars as, again, this was quite dazzling to me watching this as a young Irishman, as the handsome, rugged, masculine romantic lead who is also Irish despite having a Scottish accent. It is
Americans wouldn't know the difference. You're right.
It's all Gaelic. It's just like they're on this same sort of islandy area, right? That sort of part of Europe. Just point to it on a map. But yeah, it's but yeah, no, the Darby O'Gill and the Little People, yes, that was another sort of Sean Connery moment for me. That's Sean Connery. That's the guy from The Rock and James Bond. Yeah.
Well, there you go. In 1959's Darby O'Gill and the Little People, by the way, just to put into context why while I don't know that because I was born in America in 1981, so didn't play the theater houses here, but interesting.
It was very much. It was a Walt Disney movie. Again, it very much seems to have been one of those productions around the time of The Quiet Man, where it's this kind of interest in like what Ireland is like for Americans. Like Americans want to know what, particularly those with connections historically to Ireland, want to know what the old country, as it were, is like. And it's like, yes, the old country is populated by leprechauns and wily, canny old men and Scotsmen because they're
and Sean Connerys.
Yeah.
It's not accurate in any way. No leprechauns, no Sean Connerys. Although it is a nice look at him pre-Bond, like as a young man. As you're saying, as the strapping romantic hero.
It is notable that, like, apparently Walt Disney conceived of the film during a trip to Ireland with the Irish Folklore Commission in 1947. I kind of like that. It's like, not the Irish Tourist Board, not the Irish government, the Irish Folklore Commission.
You got, it's all about the people you know, I guess. Then we transition to something I did not know existed until Darren pointed it out to me. I don't know if I would have heard about this. There's a trailer out right now for the movie Songbird, which will come out. Oh, when is it coming out?
January 2021.
Oh, that's soon.
I mean, you didn't watch it and get the sense that this was kind of shot in a couple of weeks with like everybody's like best mate coming in and working on it. I get the real sense that there is that we shot this while it was hip and relevant, and we are going to release it come hell or high water while it is still hip and relevant. Yes, very much rush it out because I again, not to judge the movie based only on the trailer that I've seen of it, it does not seem like it will have a lot of cultural staying power outside of one very particular cultural context, and that is the extended, never-ending time is a flat circle situation in which we are currently living.
I cast a large amount of shame on literally everyone involved in making this. So the premise behind the movie Songbird is a global pandemic is in place and a lockdown order.
It's explicitly COVID. If you watch the trailer, it's explicitly COVID. The virus in the movie set in a slightly dystopian, slightly future world of 2023, where I think the trailer states that we are like 242 weeks into lockdown, and COVID-23 continues to mutate. So there's no ambiguity. Like this isn't like an abstract concept. This isn't like, oh man, well, isn't it odd that this idea that I had just happened to be relevant again? It's like, no. The idea is like the internet's crazy conspiracy thoughts.
And the main thrust of the story, as we can suss out from the trailer, is a young couple in love who can't get together because of quarantine lockdowns, are in a battle against the government and other sick people and people's paranoia.
I think you have to say the deep state. I think you have to say
there's got to be a deep state in there, and Bradley Whitford is there, and shame on you, Bradley Whitford. And it's based. It is this. If you've ever wondered out there what an exploitation film is, Songbird.
No, it's
I have not seen anything this like gross and negligent in quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, like I consider myself to have a very wide boundary in terms of taste. Like I'm generally like, let's give stuff the benefit of the doubt. Let's actually, and again, like generally speaking, like again, even in this case, maybe we'll watch it and maybe it'll turn out to be a masterpiece. But I'm like watching the trailer, I'm like, even with that caveat in mind, even with like the maximum amount of benefit of the doubt that I can give, this seems crass, tasteless, exploitative, borderline reckless, insulting, vindictive, and possibly even like, yeah, all of those.
All of them.
So like the thing that is most striking watching the trailer for Songbird, is that it is not just like a pandemic lockdown romance, because you could probably do that. In fact, actually, like one of the great things about I say one of the great things, one of the things that is not terrible, of the many terrible things that are terrible about the situation, is that like people have been, in terms of filmmaking, taking advantage of it and constructing unusual films built around it. So, you know, you have things like the lockdown sitcom taking place on kind of BBC with Michael Sheen and David Tennant, which is about two guys, the two of them conversing over Zoom about the movie they're going to make when they get out of quarantine. And that's clever. And it's like, yes, we're acknowledging that the pandemic is happening and we're building it around, we're weaving it into our drama. Or you have like Zoom, which is on Shudder, which is a horror movie. It's 50 minutes long. It's very worth seeking out. But it's about like this group of friends who conduct a seance over a Zoom meeting. And again, it's called Host. Apologies, not Zoom, it's Host. But they're hosting a seance over a Zoom meeting, and it goes horribly, horribly wrong. But again, it's built off the modern moment, and it's very clever, and it's very well observed. My issue with Songbird, which is produced by Michael Bay, just to put that in context, no reason to mention that whatsoever.
Shame on Michael Bay. For many things, including this.
The concept of Songbird, looking at it, is that it is not just a pandemic thriller romance, which is how it's being sold, which is a very odd genre, pandemic thriller romance. It is the internet's worst, most paranoid, most insane thoughts about the world that we live in today, and like structured and released as an exploitation feature film. It's very much like if you made The Purge, but The Purge was a real thing, and instead of happening like once a year, it happened every night. It would be similarly tasteless. So like in the trailer that we see for Songbird, there is, you know, obviously the virus is loose, everybody's socially isolating. There are elements there that kind of point to the modern world. People are on bikes, they're doing exercise at home, they're checking the temperature on phone apps and stuff like that, and people who are immune have certain privileges that they wouldn't have otherwise. But then you build the obligatory science fiction dystopia on top of it, where there are quarantine camps, which are being run by the city's sanitation department, run by the corrupt Peter Stormare, by the way, in case you didn't get that he was evil. The character is literally played by Peter Stormare, who are hauling off citizens and taking them away and literally throwing them into camps where they're locked up. You have people who are afraid to come out with their diagnosis because the big government's going to come at them. And there's this recurring kind of sense when you watch it that, like, is the pandemic being used to keep people under control? Is it being used to establish a borderline fascist state? Has America turned into a police state exploiting the fact that people are locked down? Yeah. It's basically all the terrible, terrible stuff that you've seen circulated on Facebook about like why this is happening. Like, I wouldn't
be... The stuff that is now being flagged, like, by Facebook and Twitter bots for disinformation. Yeah. They're making a movie out of it.
Yeah, and, like, you're waiting for a moment in the trailer where, like, Craig Robertson, who's also in this, to be absolutely clear.
Shame on you, Craig Robinson.
Craig Robinson turns to, like, Sophia Carson and says, do you know that when you wear a mask, you get less oxygen to your brain? They're trying to keep us drowsy. Like, you're waiting for that moment to happen in the trailer, and you're like... What the hell is wrong with this? Why is this happening? Why would you make this? It's just, it's terrible. Like, it's a really crass, vulgar, insulting thing to do. Particularly when you have, like, people whose relatives have died from this, and people whose relatives have died from this... Sorry, this is... I should be getting some person, but, like, people whose relatives have died from this because... people believe the things that this movie seems to be suggesting are inevitable when fighting a pandemic like this, and it just feels like it's in an exploitative sense. It's exploiting that paranoia and that fear and hoping that when they release it on the 29th of January, that people will just buy money, fork it out, retweet it, share it, be like, yeah, this is what it's really like. This is what it feels like. And it's like, no. It just feels so terrible. It feels I felt like I needed a shower after watching it, and not like in a fun way, or not in like a this is like a really good horror way, in like a people said yes to this, people signed off on this, people gave money to this, people not only wrote a script from this, greenlit a script from this, highlighted production, gave it a big enough budget to hire Peter Stormare, Demi Moore, Paul Walter Hauser, Bradley Whitford, and continued to make it. They then edited it. They then structured it into this trailer, and they released it. And at that point, up to that point, nobody with any power said, is this really a good idea? Maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe we should tone it down. But yeah, right. that's my reaction to Songbird. And I'm sorry for like introducing you to it, Jack. I feel like I destroyed your innocence when you said, "Do you want to talk about anything?" I'm like, "We should probably talk about the Songbird trailer." And you're like, "What's the Songbird trailer?" And then,
oh no,
yeah, I'm sorry, Jack.
One, you should be like to me. This is one of those like movies that would have come out like a year or so after the pandemic is over, right? Yeah. We have a vaccine now, life is getting back to normal. Oh yeah, here's a creepy what if scenario. But we are living in a world in which thousands of people are still dying every day, at least here in the States, from the global pandemic. So let's make a horror, an action horror thriller romance government conspiracy movie. Shame, so much shame on everyone involved. Stacy, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, seconding the shame. I think that is the galling part of it, right? Is that this is about a situation that's ongoing. And rather than kind of reflecting people's experiences, as Darren has said, people are still trying to form relationships and keep things going under lockdown. But rather than reflecting that and being like, oh, isn't it slightly more difficult for us to see each other because there is a horrible, deadly virus circulating among our population? It gives us the worst case scenario, which is we're still dealing with this in 3 years, and the government will really step up in terms of monitoring and disciplining people who have this. It really does play into people's worst fears in a very exploitative way, I would say. Also, just a side note, quarantine camps seems like it shouldn't make sense. So you're quarantining camps of people together? That's just going to make it worse.
I imagine, and again, part of me really wishes this isn't the case, but just so we're clear, but part of me wonders if the guy who was like, you know what you need in this? You need quarantine camps. They're like, that's a stupid idea. And he's like, yeah, but if you abbreviate it, it's Q camp. Like QAnon. I hear that's big on the internet.
Stop.
That's what I like part of me, like, because that was the first, because it's like when you see the like, because of course the trailer shows you the quarantine camp, which by the way looks like every dystopian future ever. In case you don't get, the government is coming for your liberty, which is again like the worst, all of like the internet's worst thoughts. And this movie is like, give them to me. Give them to me, and I will sell them back to you as a blockbuster entertainment. And by the way, Craig Robertson will be in there because you love him, right? But like the camp actually says, I think it has like Q hyphen whatever numbers there, or Q camp on it, and it's like they're doing that. They're actually doing that. It's
That's
like
Well, to me, the other like galling part of this, but besides the general shame of producing a movie like this while the pandemic is going, the other galling part of it is just on a salesmanship side of it. I know the three of us, we've been living with different levels of quarantining and Zooming for work, and we have Zoom board game nights with family and friends because we can't get together. And when I watch something like Saturday Night Live and they do a Zoom themed sketch, I immediately roll my eyes because I don't want to deal with that. I have to deal with that every day. That's not good comedy fodder as far as I'm concerned. I don't want to watch a sitcom via Zoom. I don't want to do that because that's the part of my life I don't like right now. So like, what kind of tone deaf salesmanship are they have where like, everybody's been locked down and feeling really stressed. What's going to sell like hotcakes? A fucking quarantine movie.
Yeah. This is where I wonder, like, part of me wonders, like, this is terrible and tasteless and tactless and horrible. But like when next, October or November, when Vanity Fair pop up the 10 most downloaded and most watched and most streamed movies, like, all three of us certain that this isn't going to be placed unusually or absurdly high on that list? Kind of like Extraction was this year, where everyone was like, Extraction's that kind of disappointing Chris Hemsworth movie on Netflix. But somehow it's the fourth most popular movie on streaming this year.
Well, but see, like, Extraction is like perfect B-grade action schlock. Everyone loves that, right?
And it's escapism. Sure. Yeah.
Boom. It's escapism. It's there to be like, it's not good. You get to see Thor shoot some guns and punch some people. Everybody likes that. This is specifically targeting a part of all of our lives that people are literally protesting right now. Yeah. I can't imagine a world. Then again, I've been proven wrong before. I can't imagine a world in which people are going to lock really hard onto Songbird.
Do we think that, like, for those people who are protesting, that this will be like a rallying cry to them, where there's very much an attempt to kind of court that, where it's like, see, we're right to resist the government because obviously it will become a fascist police state where people break into your house and take you away if you're sick and throw you in a quarantine camp. Again, the concept of quarantine camps. But like, part of me wonders though, is that what? Because I a lot of jokes about how stupid Hollywood executives are. And again, Michael Bay, we talked about that story with Phone Booth, where he read the script for Phone Booth and was like, great script, got one question, how do we get him out of the phone booth? And then I can make this work. But like, not to denigrate Michael Bay as a filmmaker or producer with strong instincts. And again, worth noting, Bay's instincts 50-50 tend to go... Oh. No. You didn't let me finish.
Oh, so I'm sorry.
About 50-50, 50% of the time, Bay manages to grossly misunderstand what people who are critics or who like good cinema or particularly invested in good cinema want, but also at the same time, what apparently mass audiences will pay huge amounts of money to go see, such as like the 1st through 6th Transformers film. That like Bay's instincts occasionally manage to hone in on that sweet spot. And like watching Songbird, I can't, like, there's a part of my brain that is horrified by the prospect that like this isn't Michael Bay missing like he missed with the last Transformers film or like he missed with The Island, which is arguably one of his best films. This is Michael Bay who's going to miss critics and hit audiences like he did with Transformers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the bit of my reptile brain that's like, this is the worst of all possible worlds.
Yeah. I would say even without the pandemic angle, there are certain kind of gross tropes in this that I've noticed, like just from the trailer. And again, it is produced by Michael Bay rather than written or scripted by him.
Yeah.
But even just that the focus of the peril in the trailer is this guy's girlfriend, who's this young, pretty white woman who seems really sweet and angelic and caring. And the sort of focal point of the trailer is that her neighbor, who is this elderly woman of color, has the virus. And that has now put her at risk. And she is sort of the person who's honed in on as the person who is in trouble, as opposed to her neighbor.
The person whose story is worth telling. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. She's this perfect victim. She's the ideal, like, sweet, innocent young woman in trouble who can't do anything for herself or for her neighbor. She has to get her bike messenger boyfriend, who's immune, to try and find a way out of it for her.
You're absolutely correct. Like, by the looks of the trailer, it's literally a cautionary tale for liberals. Like, don't look out for sick,
look out for your neighbors.
elderly immigrant people because they will get you in trouble later. Like, that is the message of the trailer. Who knows if the movie's going to be that?
Sure.
But that's the other insulting thing about the movie.
Also,
yet a third insulting.
It just fails on every level.
I mean, also, like, the fact the trailer's 2 minutes long and there's like a solid 15 seconds of like pandemic sex in there with Alexandra Daddario, and it's like, what audience do you think that you are serving with this? Like, what kind of odd, like, fetish do you think people have for, like, again, that Michael Bay thing where it's like there's a sexy woman, so there will be sex, but also it's a pandemic movie, so there's going to be tissues and masks, and it's like
Mm.
I feel like, you know, the pandemic has warped a lot of social norms, but
Mhm.
I feel like we're not quite there yet in terms of that being a place that I'm comfortable with mainstream movies going. Um,
Mm.
it's yeah, very very odd. We should point out, actually, yes, Stacey's right. It is produced by Michael Bay. It's not directed by Michael Bay. It's directed
Mm.
by Adam Mason, who is probably best known as a music video director. I think he
Mhm.
did a number of Alice in Chain videos as well. And he is not particularly well known. I don't think he even has a Wikipedia page. But he has done a lot of directing of low budget British horror movies, including Broken, which is famously advertised in the UK as "Make Saw look like a children's film," which makes me completely certain that this is going to be handled with the tact, care, and dignity
Mm.
that a movie of this nature deserves, really.
Oh dear.
No, and you know, like, to top it all off, hopefully everyone listening to this or watching this will you know, watch the trailer and just revel in our disgust. But to top off the trailer is the classic taking a song everyone knows and slowing it down and warping it to give you that sense of uneasy, which is, you know, Bob Marley and the Wailers, "Don't Worry, Every Little Thing Is Gonna Be All Right," which is like, okay, yeah, like that's like trite and like dumbly ironic in its own. Like, if that song was appearing in a what appeared to be a good movie, that's the most we would make fun of it. Is, I can't believe they're using this trite slow down a popular song in an ironic fashion, but they are doing it here as well.
And they
Mm.
don't even do like the choral version. At least if you're going to slow it down and creep it up, like add a proper choral version. This is just like, no, we just resampled the lyrics and layered them over some ominous, scary music. And it's like, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
No, we just took the lyrics, put a ton of reverb on it, and cut.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Like,
Also, do you remember that they used this song in I Am Legend, which is another apocalypse movie?
did they?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, just because it's in, so it's the scene where Will Smith is giving his dog a bath, and he puts on the music, and he's singing to his dog in the bath while he's washing him. That's why it is stuck in my brain. And at that point, he realizes it's about to go from day to night, and there is, again, this point of contrast that I think this trailer is trying to pull off and sort of failing, because it's such a hack trope now to put a
Okay.
slowed down happy song in a trailer.
Yeah.
But I think that's what they're going for, is it's like, oh, everything is gonna be all right, everything's nice in this moment, and then suddenly there's this tonal shift.
Yeah.
And
So,
the
like, not
song
only is it a
jars.
hack trope, but it's a stolen hack trope.
But they've ripped
Perfect.
it off.
It's
Yeah.
perfect.
But like,
Perfect.
again, like, part
Sums
of
it
me
up
is-
really.
Again, it's like that kind of galaxy reptile brain. It's like if like your id had that little Twitter like icon where it's like big brain take, mega brain take, galaxy brain take, where it's
Mhm.
like it's the most cynically calculate, like pointed, no subtlety whatsoever, no varnish, no layer of fantasy or excusability over it. It's just like, what
Yeah.
are people afraid of right now? They're afraid of COVID. It's in the movie. What are people afraid of, like, as this movie's developing? It's like, well, I mean, it has been going on a long time. They're worried that things aren't going to be all right in the end. Yeah! Put on a sad version of everything's going to be all right, as if to suggest, wait for it here, Bob, everything's not going to be all right. And he's like, gee, that's a great point. It's like, damn it, that's good. I think we've earned the tie tonight. I think we earned the takeout tie in the writer's room tonight.
Oh, there were pats on backs after
Yeah.
like the editor did that. Like, and I'm assuming the trailer editor did that as a joke. Like, oh yeah, this is the lamest thing we can do here. And there
And
were
then they did
pats
it.
on backs all around. Champagne
Yeah.
was popped. You did it. You cracked the code. Oh.
Because we maybe
Thank
need
you.
an
Alright,
upper here, just a quick little anecdote, because this does star Bradley Whitford. My favorite story about Bradley Whitford is talking to my aunt, who watched A Star Is Born a little while ago, and she was like, well, it was a very good movie. I really, really enjoyed it. But I have to admit, you told me that Bradley Cooper was in it. And I'm like, yeah, Bradley Cooper is in it, but that's not the man from The West Wing. And it's like, oh, no, you're thinking of Bradley Whitford. And my aunt goes, oh, that's a shame. I thought the sexy Bradley was going to be in A Star Is Born.
Damn right. Damn right. I mean, first of all, shame on Bradley Whitford for being in this movie.
Sure.
But yes, I would rather Bradley Whitford than Bradley Cooper. Yeah, that's fair.
I'm now,
You know what?
like,
He's aging well. Bradley
He
Whitford.
is.
He looks great.
Mhm.
I do. I'm now imagining a version of A Star Is Born with Bradley Whitford in it, and it's a very, very different movie.
So Lady
You know,
Gaga or Bradley Whitford and Bradley Cooper.
Bradley Cooper plays the Lady Gaga role, and
Yes.
Bradley Whitford plays the Bradley Cooper role. That is a movie I would 100%.
I'd watch that. That
watch.
sounds great.
Yeah.
It's much better than Songbird.
I just have to I have to go back now. Like, we'll watch a little West Wing, watch Get Out, watch Billy Madison, and just remember Bradley Whitford before he made a bad decision.
In the good times. Yeah.
In the good time. Watch Bradley Whitford in the good times.
Because again, the cast is astounding. Again, just to run through it, we ran through it before, but to be clear, Craig Robinson, Peter Stormare, Alexandra Daddario, Demi Moore, Paul Walter Hauser, the guy who was in Clint Eastwood's Oscar movie at the start of this year, Bradley Whitford, and again, obviously they're all in support, which is what's interesting about it, is that, the young leads are KJ Apa and Sophia Carson, who are maybe not actors I'd be as familiar with as those other ones. But
someone might know KJ Apa as Archie in Riverdale. He's the lead in one of the most popular television shows on right now. Shame on you, KJ. Sophia, I looked up her credits, and she is in. She's probably most well known for being in Disney's The Descendants,
which is
so she'd be a Disney Channel.
Oh, different from the George Clooney Descendants.
Only slightly different from George Clooney's The Descendants. They play characters who are related to famous Disney villains. They're the niece or the granddaughter of Ursula, bullshit like that. Why I know this, I cannot tell you.
Attracting a cast of that caliber. Again, this is a Platinum Dunes production, and listeners may know Platinum Dunes. They had a big success a couple of years ago with A Quiet Place, and the joke there was Michael Bay saying, "I'm not used to seeing movies with my name on them get good reviews," was the famous joke in response to that. But Platinum Dunes throughout the early 2000s were known for their spate of terrible horror remakes. Things like, say, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Hills of Eyes, Last House on the Left, that sort of stuff. And watching the trailer for Songbird, it feels of a piece with those movies, but somehow has the cast of a potential Oscar winner. I cannot are people that hard for work in a pandemic? Are actors that starved for work in a pandemic that it's we have a script? Yeah, I don't know. I can't. Anyway, sorry.
No, I think that to me is the most important question, because someone like Craig Robinson, who is mildly politically active, who I assume, knowing the little bit I know about Craig Robinson, is probably someone who believes that the global pandemic is real. I'm gonna put it out there. Someone like Bradley Whitford, who is very vocally politically active, who also believes that the global pandemic is real. Why?
Is it possible it's setting up a twist like The Hunt? Like that, watching it, I wonder if that's if there's some sort of twist coming in the movie where it's going to turn out to be like The Hunt, where it's oh, it looks like we are actually hunting Trump supporters for sport, but it's actually a parody about liberals to show that we are very conscious of how and self-aware and self-effacing we are. And I wonder, is Songbird meant to be oh, people are watching and are going to think that, oh, maybe the virus is fake and it's a global conspiracy, but it's not going to turn out to be. But I'm watching the trailer, I'm wondering where could you take the elements from that trailer and put them in that direction, where it turns out that, I don't know, the Mexican immigrant grandmother next door with the virus is actually secretly part of the deep state or something? I don't
That is actually, though, that could be the interesting bait and switch with this, is they set up an entire movie where we are led to believe that the virus is fake and it's a government conspiracy, and the moral of the story is the virus is real, let's all be careful.
Yeah, and it's patting themselves on the back for being socially conscious and relevant, and it's no, just fund advertising telling people the virus is real, and also don't make a trailer that's so exploitative and crass. that's like that like that's this kind of spoiler that I kind of see with Songbird, is that like the trailer looks like it's going to be one thing, the movie is probably going to turn out to be something slightly different but equally tasteless. Like that's like watching this, I don't get the sense it's going to be a bait and switch where it's a terrible idea and it becomes a brilliant idea. I get the sense it's going to be a terrible idea that's going to become a slightly more nuanced but somehow equally terrible idea in the actual film that's produced. That's my kind of like that's my long shot kind of like swing sort of I'll be wrong in January but everyone will have forgotten, hopefully, because that's like 5 years away take.
I'm trying to remember, there's a particular self-help book. There's a particular self-help book out there. And I can't, I'm trying to quickly Google the name so I can remember it, but it's targeted towards young women, and it has a title very similar to like He'll Only Like You If. And it's like targeted towards young women who are self-conscious about their looks, saying like, oh, if I get this book will give me all the tips I need to make boys like me. But then the book is just boys will only like you if you like yourself. And it's actually like, so it's like tricking young women into self-conscious young women into like, oh yeah, I need to be more confident in myself or whatever.
So
that is such...
You're banking on Songbird being like, okay, we've got the QAnon people, we've got all the people who think this is a hoax. They're sitting down for movie night with their popcorn and their drinks, and it's like, bam, we hit them in the third act. And after that, they're like, well, yeah, it's obviously not a hoax.
Well, then you have their money, right? You have all these idiots' money, which is great. Let's take money away from them, and then maybe like 1% of them go, oh,
that's a good point. And that's because nothing makes me think that's a good point like watching The Hunt. Like at the end of The Hunt, I was like, that's a good point. Nothing quite enlightened or expanded my worldview like watching M. Night Shyamalan's The Village. It really makes you think.
It really makes you think. Well, that's my Hail Mary. Basically, that's my like, this movie, like I will take away all of the shame that I put upon all of this production, if that's the moral of the movie, and then I'll just make fun of them for making a bad movie.
Yeah, but even then you have like the packaging and selling of it at this moment as well. Again, like at a time, you know, not to get too political on the podcast, but the trailer released in the run-up to an election where this is, arguably one of the most politicized issues in American culture at the moment. And it's like, even if the movie turns out to be a masterpiece, the trailer is an incredible act of cynicism of itself. And you can't erase that. You cannot like wipe that away, no matter how clever the movie is. Because everybody who's seen the trailer has still only seen the trailer.
No, and like I have my I voted sticker right here on my microphone. And so, like, again, not to get too political, but the pandemic was the biggest talking point for our presidential election in the US. It turned into a incredible back and forth between supporters and non-believers. And so, like, yes, it's political. Yeah, it's so far this movie looks like a terrible, insulting, exploitative waste of time, space, and in fact, not even waste of time and space. It looks to be dangerous, as it will give people who don't believe in the global pandemic more fuel for their fire. But maybe. What is it about me that I have this hope in my heart? I shouldn't.
I again, king of the benefit of the doubt. I like generally consider myself to be a person whose boundaries of like good taste are fairly wide. I will generally reserve judgment on something until I've seen it, and it's like, but this is the trailer for the thing, and the trailer for the thing is a lot.
It's a lot. Is a lot.
Yeah. I think you just don't want to believe, Jack, that people are as cynical as the people who have made this film, because you are not yourself. Is that
That's true.
Yeah.
And that's
my final thought.
No, and that's exactly my and every liberal person's problem.
Yeah.
Wow.
We like to believe that some people are good when they're not.
I love that Jack's like point on like Songbird, his closing little button on this segment is, you know what the problem with liberals is? liberals would never make a movie like Songbird. Nobody on this podcast would make a movie like Songbird, and that's what's wrong with this podcast.
So thanks everybody for watching and or listening. I'm sorry, no, that was mostly a joke, unless anyone has any other wrapping up thoughts on Songbird or anything in general. No, we might cut that bit, but we'll see how it works in editing.
Yeah. In terms of closing thoughts, watch a good horror movie. His House is on Netflix and is phenomenal. And it's well worth your time if you haven't seen it already. It is an actual well-constructed claustrophobic horror that's exceedingly well made and incredibly clever. So it is very worth your time if you're looking for something. His House should be available on a quick search. Starring Doctor Who's Matt Smith and a host of other very talented actors.
Beautiful. Stacy, any sort of uplifting what can you recommend people, like, if they're looking for a movie, a television show, something uplifting and nice, something that you would like to share with everyone?
Something uplifting or nice?
No,
well,
not even. No, I'm sorry to put that on you.
Listeners should be aware His House is not necessarily uplifting or nice.
So is it a counterpoint?
Like in my head, even a movie that's like terrible and horrifying can be uplifting just because you're watching a fantastic piece of art. And I suppose, like, in my head, that's what I meant, and it came out like, give me a sunny, shiny movie.
Like that book in the Addams Family that they open and the sun just shines out. I want to be Dan Hedaya sunning himself.
What I meant to say is, do you have any recommendations at all for anyone?
Well, I mean, if you haven't watched The Addams Family and the superior Addams Family values for a while, I don't think you can go too far wrong. They're very, very enjoyable. Like, I have to say, I laughed out loud a lot rewatching both of them recently. They're just, I would not recommend, I have to say, the 2019 Addams Family film, which I watched recently enough. I don't know if either of you have seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe not get into that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, don't. No. But I can double down on that. Both Addams Family and Addams Family Value. Obviously, watch the superior Addams Family first.
Well, you have to watch it first. It's the first
continuity.
One.
Yeah.
Continuity, right. But no, I think they're fantastic movies. They're great relics from that era in the 90s. And if you watched them as a kid and haven't watched them since, you will understand where you get a lot of your modern sensibilities regarding horror and goth girls.
And family values.
And family values.
The Holy Trinity.
Like the amount of blood, Wednesday Addams, and like a general loving familial relationship, like that the Addams Family was the foundation for me.
Very important.
I was rewatching as an adult, I was amazed at how dark they were. That was like that all sailed over my head, like Pugsley causing car crashes outside the house, which presumably ended up in fatalities. But
right.
But I kind of I love how they commit to the darkness of it. Which is just outstanding and amazing, and there's no hesitation or qualification to it as well. I really, really like those movies.
Absolutely. Well, so then that's the positive note, is the Addams Family and His House. Thank everybody for watching and or listening to this, the Escapist Movie Podcast. Thank you, Stacy, for joining us for, slightly bumpy conversations about global pandemics and the Addams Family.
Just anything to keep it light, right? Just wanted a light conversation to unwind with. No, it was lovely. Thank you.
We're talking about dead Scotsmen and pandemic exploitation.
We like to keep it simple here, especially for people first time on the podcast. We keep it nice and light and breezy.
Of course, yeah.
All right. Well, Thanks everybody, and bye.
Thanks, Jack. Bye.
Bye.